title of her play is Merchant of Venice by William Shakespeare.
The type of comedy is a satirical comedy. The evidence is in Portia and Nerissa being deceivers, Antonio as a cuckold, and Bassanio as a goof.
Russian merchant Antonio borrows money for his friend Bassanio, who needed it to entice the wealthy heiress Portia. Due to all his money being tied up in fleet investment, Antonio asks for the money from the wealthy Jew Shylock, who, by the way, hates him for his anti-Semitic behavior towards him. Shylock, however, disregards his discontent towards Antonio and agrees to loan him the money on the basis that he pays back the loan, or Shylock will have a pound of his flesh. Thinking that his investment in the fleece will be enough to pay his debts, Antonio agrees to the terms of the deal with Shylock.
While Bassanio tries to woo her, Portia desperately tries to find a proper suitor to court her. Her father's will requires that all suitors choose from 3 caskets, 2 of which are empty and 1 contains her picture. Whichever suitor picks the casket containing Portia's portrait gets to marry her, but the suitor that chooses an empty casket must remain unmarried for the rest of his life. Many wealthy princes failed to pick the right casket and were denied, including the Prince of Morocco. Bassanio journeys to Belmont to where the challenge was being held, and was able to choose the correct casket, and Portia merrily agrees to wed him.
Meanwhile, Shylock's daughter Jessica elopes with Bassanio's friend, Lorenzo, and Antonio's only way of repaying the debt he owed to Shylock, the fleet of ships, was supposedly wrecked. Bassanio feels responsible and guilty when he hears that Antonio is being pressured to repay his debt, so he travels to Venice to help him. Soon after Bassanio leaves with his friend Gratiano, Portia secretly follows him to Venice with her maid, Nerissa, disguised as a male lawyer, and his clerk. Bassanio arrives just in time to find Shylock demanding a pound of Antonio's flesh. Shylock, enraged by the loss of his daughter to a Christian, refuses to take Bassanio's repayment.
Portia, with the permission of the Duke, finds a loophole in Shylock's contract and turns it against him. She argues that Shylock can draw a pound of Antonio's flesh without shedding any of his blood, since it's against the law to shed a Christian's blood. Shylock is forced to forfeit his claim and required to give half his wealth to Venice and the other half to Antonio. Antonio gives Shylock back his money on the basis that Shylock becomes a Christian, and gives the rest of his wealth to Lorenzo and Jessica upon his death. A despaired Shylock agrees to the deal. At this time, it is discovered that all of Antonio's ships have returned intact. Everyone rejoices at the turnout of things except Shylock.
The end.
Antonio, Bassanio, Lorenzo, and Gratiano are all friends. Antonio takes a loan from the Jew Shylock in order to give that money to Bassanio so he can impress and therefore marry Portia. Portia then tricks Shylock into not being able to get his forfeiture from Antonio's loan. Jessica, who is Shylock's daughter, leaves Shylock in order to marry Lorenzo. And later on, Nerissa and Gratiano get married as well.
The main evidence that The Merchant of Venice is a satirical comedy is the role that the major characters play.
For example, Antonio is a cuckold because he gets into a loan with someone who he knows has animosity towards him and has a forfeiture that he knows won't be able to repay, the pound of flesh.
Shylock is the wheeler and dealer because he offers Antonio a deal that he makes seem more appealing than it really is.
Totally. Portia is a trickster because she dresses up as a doctor and tricks Shylock into thinking that he can have Antonio's flesh, but without spilling any blood. She also tricks her husband into giving away her ring.
Bassanio is the goof for easily being fooled by Portia's disguise, as well as letting his best friend take out an unpredictable loan on his behalf.
The most powerful symbol in the play is the pound of flesh. It binds Shylock to Antonio and Bassanio, and it is much more than just a contract. To Shylock, it represents the little retribution he can get for the anti-Semitic views that Antonio and Bassanio have towards them. And for Antonio and Bassanio, it ends up representing forgiveness and mercy, because in the end they do not have to give up the pound of flesh.
Another powerful symbol in the play are the ships. The ships in this play belong to Antonio and are how he will pay Shylock back for the money he borrowed from Bassanio. The success of the ships affects if they can pay off the debt and effectively, and Antonio is to survive in his fortune. Essentially, the ships represent hope and reliance to Antonio and Bassanio. When the ships are thought to have crashed, Antonio is crushed with waves of feelings of bad luck and misfortune. At the end, the ships are said to have succeeded in thus bringing a sense of fulfillment and good fortune.
The caskets serve as a means for Portia to find the man that she will wed. It is like a lottery for her hand in marriage. The caskets thus symbolize good luck and good fortune because of Portia's beauty. Also, those that decide to choose between the caskets do so at their own risk. The desire and lure of the caskets ultimately represents making sacrifices in order to bring happiness and fulfillment to their lives.
Well said. A motif that presents itself well is how wealth is used as a mechanism to gain true happiness by Shylock, Antonio, and Bassanio. While Shylock's is used to gain false happiness and stature, Antonio uses it to save a sacred bond of friendship and his own well-being, and Bassanio uses it to gain an opportunity to marry the one he loves most. Overall, all three rely heavily on this.
We're here to talk about the themes of The Merchant of Venice. The theme of mercy plays a huge role in the play, particularly during Antonio's trial. Shylock shows no mercy for Antonio as he ruthlessly pursues the pound of flesh that he has agreed to pay. Portia, who is disguised as a lawyer, asks him to show Antonio mercy. He refuses. Bassanio even offers to pay him triple the value of the loan, but he would not do it. In the end, his greed is what defeats him. Portia puts her plot into action and turns the law on Shylock. He does not get his pound of flesh, and as a matter of fact, he loses everything that he owns. This example demonstrates the idea that those who do not show mercy will receive and deserve none.
Bye.
Another theme prominent in The Merchant of Venice is hatred as a cycle. Throughout the play, Shylock claims that he is simply applying the lessons taught to him by his Christian neighbors, and it becomes a necessary part of both his character and his arguments in the court. In Shylock's first appearance, his plan of revenge is entirely revolved around the insults and injuries that Antonio has inflicted upon him in the past. As the play continues, Shylock's reasoning is that he is simply applying what years of abuse have taught him. When responding to the question of what good a pound of flesh would do, he says, "The villainy you teach me I will execute, and it shall go hard, but I will better the instruction." Not all of Shylock's actions can be blamed on poor teachings, and some can argue that Antonio is responsible for his own near execution. With the trial's end, Antonio demands that Shylock convert to Christianity, but no other punishment. Antonio, as well as the Duke, effectively ends the conflict by starving it of the injustices it needs to continue.